Ladies and gentlemen, the Olympic Games are now over. But sir, they just opened. Incorrect. We are launching a new Olympics, the Gold Games, run by me.
What's wrong with the Olympics? The US always win.
Totally woke garbage, those games. They'll let any country compete. Except, apparently, Russia, which is not very fair.
What are the events gonna be?
Well, we'll have very many strong new events. This winter, a lot of ice.
Ice hockey?
Not until we take Canada. Our ice events will focus on abducting and shooting. They call it a biathlon.
Are you keeping any of the old events?
Possibly the Nordic combined. We will be combining the Nordics into the United States very strongly. Any other questions? Well, how can countries win? By presenting me with all of their medals, or else.
But what's in it for them?
Well, you can ask the lady from Venezuela about that. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Public regime.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Nostradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Straight ahead, Beth Parlato of the Supreme Court and Girls Sports, Jacob Olidort, Iran, and what's next, Nicole Huyer, Mayor Mamdani's misery in New York, Gabriella Hoffman with New England Energy Mamas, and Bart Millard can only imagine. Sketch comedy from the puppet regime, Al Berry, the Babylon Bee, and Nick Peterson. And in the spotlight, it's Olivia Dean. And now from Times Square, where Mayor Mamdani won't pick up the garbage, nobody packed a coat, and the pizza rats have taken over city services. Here's Kevin. Welcome to the weekend. We've got a lot to get to. It's going to be a big, busy show. And we have got the superstars here today. Bart Millard's here from Mercy Me, the brand new movie, I can only imagine, too, opening this weekend. You've got the Olympics opening. You've got the Super Bowl. You've got a bowl of Super Bowl chili, my recipe. You've got so much good stuff coming your way. I thank you for being here. Thank you for making us a priority for your weekend, because I'm really grateful and genuinely happy to be with you. I'm just actually happy to be inside of a warm studio. It's like 5 degrees outside with a wind chill that's 15 below, and it touches your skin, and you just think it's and it's bad. It's just that bad. So having said all of that, thank you for letting me in your home. Thank you for going with us this weekend. So much to get to, but I'm really curious. Well, there's a couple of things I'm curious about. You've got, first of all, you've got piles and piles and mountains of garbage in New York, and I thought that when Mamdani got elected mayor, that the communist, socialist, Marxists had cures for all this stuff. I thought that they honestly had everything fixed. Like, I thought that there was supposed to be never more any. Oh, it's not utopia. Okay, that's one thing. Secondly, did you see Kamala Harris launched her? I guess she's going to run again, and she's launched an X handle called headquarters _67. 67? What is she, 13? That's crazy. She's silly. This is and that's just a gift horse, because if she jumps in and she and Gavin Newsom kill each other trying to out California one another with the most Marxist and most progressive whatever, that's going to be a cakewalk for J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, if that's the ticket. I kind of think that's going to be the ticket. But can you imagine? She was in the campaign for 100 days in the last go-around, and her highest rating was on the first day she got in. It went down in the next 100 days. In the time that she ran for office, legit for president the first time, her most popular popularity poll came out well before Iowa, and by the time she got to Iowa, she had 0% in the polls, and she dropped out of Iowa. I cannot imagine the whole country putting up with her for a 2-year presidential campaign. But go for it, lady. Please, I beg you, do the world a favor and run for president again. Waste all your resources, do a great job of diluting the Democratic gene pool, and just give all of the common sense issues back to the center right and to the pro-America people in our country. This is getting silly now. But it's also not getting funny, because this last week, a U.S. district judge by the name of Indira Talwani, who was nominated for the judgeship by President Barack Obama, said that she would not allow the IRS. Now, picture this. The IRS is a executive branch agency that reports to the president. The IRS, Internal Revenue Service, part of the executive branch. And the the Homeland Security Department, also an executive branch agency that reports to the president. And the Border Patrol within the executive branch that reports to the president. And the people that are now ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, that are getting the people who have come here illegally out of the country legally, they also are part of the executive branch that reports to the president. And yet, this district court judge, Indira Talwani, who was nominated by President Barack Obama, argued that if the IRS worked with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, both of which are under the executive branch, that if they worked together, that it in some way could violate a section of the Tax Act of 1976 based on this. This is what she says it would violate it. It includes privacy protection for U.S. taxpayers. Now, wait a second. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is only looking for people who have defrauded U.S. taxpayers of their Social Security numbers and their taxpayer IDs and so forth. And the IRS has evidence to help supply the information as to which people who have entered illegally have done that here. But the judge doesn't seem to be a very bright one from my vantage point. The judge, who was nominated by maybe a not very bright president in Barack Obama, is arguing that sharing the data, both of which are under the executive branch, from the IRS to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, could violate an act that's designed to protect the privacy of U.S. taxpayers. So the judge's order blocks ICE and the IRS from sharing data, while also prohibiting the use of data that has already been transferred pending a court review. The judge said this: defendants DHS, Secretary Noem, ICE Director, Acting Director Lyons, and their agents are enjoined from inspecting, viewing, using, copying, distributing, relying on, or otherwise acting upon any return information that had been obtained or disclosed by the IRS. People who don't even have the right to have a taxpayer status have defrauded the IRS, have defrauded the U.S. taxpayers, have worked against our immigration laws and circumvented them coming here, and have committed other crimes. These two agencies, under the president in the executive branch, aren't allowed to talk to each other about said circumvention of the laws. I don't know, friends, why Judge Indira Talwani or President Barack Obama or Governor Walz or Kamala Harris or any of these other clowns hate our country so much that they want to perpetrate and keep from happening what is going to happen. These people are going to be deported. They have committed crimes. They are heinous individuals that should have never been here to begin with. And they're going to be deported. But every single leftist in a judgeship or in a gubernatorial or mayoral office is doing everything they can to keep them here. Why? Why are they working so hard to keep people who have defrauded the American people, people who have raped American women, people who have assaulted American children, people who have murdered American citizens. Why are Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, this judge, Indira Talwani, why are they all working to make sure that these people who have injured Americans, crippled Americans, raped Americans, assaulted Americans, murdered Americans, why are they defending them? It makes no sense. And that's why they can't be trusted to be given government again. You cannot trust people that do this to ever be put in a position of serving us, because they won't. They've already proven that they don't. Kevin McCullough coming right back. Huge show. Thanks for being here.
Now, back to that Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com. Now in 505 cities on the radio, 2 television networks, and a partridge in a pear tree. Glad to have you with us. You want any information, it's thatkevinshow.com. Join the socials, get the podcast, subscribe, follow, like, recommend to others. We appreciate all that. And so glad to have you with us. You know that we like to break down some of the legal matters from time to time, and we have really smart lawyers that we bring on the show to talk about these different things. And Beth Parlato is back with us from the Independent Women's Forum. And Beth, last week there were... And I have to say, even within the Independent Women's Forum, I heard from people that were conflicted about how they interpreted the arguments as they were made in the Supreme Court and kind of the justices' kind of choice of questions and those types of things. And what I expected to be kind of a, hey, the court's going to, do the right thing here. Even from independent women senior fellows had disagreement privately, I guess, but they told me they got different vibes coming from the bench and from the court. And I'm just curious, did you have a similar reaction? Were you a little uneasy in terms of how the arguments went down? I mean, they let people come in and listen. I think that's a good thing. But what was your take on how the Supreme Court arguments went on the women's sports exclusive case last week?
Yeah. So it's funny that you said that, because that is exactly what all of us who are in this area and practicing with this constitutional arguments, it is how we felt as we were listening to the first argument. The first argument was the Idaho case, which is the Little v. Hecox, and that had 2 legal arguments in it. That was the equal protection. That had equal protection and Title IX. In any way, that was the first argument. And we were kind of, as we were listening, I was there at the Supreme Court, kind of shaking our head saying, what does this mean? When we moved on to the West Virginia, which is the BPJ case, that was a little better. Those Title IX arguments were definitely a little better. But I think what the issue is of why you're hearing mixed things is we don't believe that we're going to lose on this. We don't believe that the court is going to hold that these state laws that are sex segregated, classifying sports specifically based on biological sex. We don't think the court's going to say that that's unconstitutional. But what the issue is how broad of a ruling are we going to get? And we're basically thinking that it looks as if it's going to be more of a narrow ruling than a broader ruling. That's basically the general feeling on what ended up happening. So I can give you specifics on that.
What I heard from people in the concern category, I'll just put it that way. They weren't necessarily critical, but they were like, hey, we didn't like the stream of questions that were posed. Was that there wasn't enough about the girls' side of the issue, that it seemed like the discussion was all about boys, and that particularly in the Idaho portion of the arguments, they just barely touched on the impact on women and girls. Is that how it went down?
They weren't talking about the girls. We really heard nothing about the girls. Everything was about the boys. And then they started to make the arguments in that Idaho case. They wanted to basically say that, if this plaintiff was taking a hormone, so was taking medication, so they wanted to move it to the competition and the athletic performance part, saying that it negated, taking the hormones negated any of the athletic advantage that the individual had. And that absolutely, well, the argument, Kavanaugh kind of put a hole right in that argument. So I don't believe that they're going that way, but that's initially what we were hearing. We were hearing all about the athletic performance and athletic advantage, that it's not there. And that's not what we should have been hearing. That wasn't the point.
Do you think you weren't hearing about that because the justices accept the argument that sex is different and that you're dealing with two different types of creature?
Right. Well, when you go into the next case, they separated it an hour and a half argument for Idaho, an hour and a half argument for West Virginia. And when you heard the West Virginia case, the court started talking about asking questions on the historical definition of sex under Title IX. So that's when, so when we're hearing the first hour and a half, we're all kind of getting a little queasy here. We're thinking, wait a second, this isn't going the way it should be going. Once we heard the second set of arguments, and they really were focusing in on Title IX and the historical definition from 1972, and we're pretty confident that all the justices, at least
maybe not Katani Brown Jackson. He's confused from the beginning, but yes.
Right. But the other ones, and it may even be one of the more liberal justices, was asking questions, basically conceding that historically, since 1972, the definition of sex did not include gender identity, that it was biological sex. In fact, that was the reason for Title IX, was to do the sex-separated athletics, to give women equal opportunity and fairness in athletics. So that was the whole point of it. And they went through all of that. They went through exactly what that meant historically. So I think that's where they'll land. They will land. The Title IX argument is a pretty good argument. It's pretty tight. So I think they will land that these laws in the states, there's 27 states that have laws that protect women's sports, that they will say that it is not in violation of Title IX. In fact, that was the reason for Title IX. So we would believe that that's how they will land. The second part of the argument, though, is the Equal Protection Clause. So both cases also had that argument, whether or not the state laws violate the Equal Protection Clause under the 14th Amendment because they're discriminating on the basis of sex.
So let me break this down. Do you think that the three left of center justices, do you think any of them come over to the traditionalist viewpoint of men and women are equal but different in terms of their biology?
Mm-hmm. There may be one. I mean, Justice Kagan, I don't know if you would listen to the argument. She was asking questions that would indicate that at least on the Title IX argument, that she would believe that historically the definition of sex meant biological sex. Jackson, she still doesn't know what a woman is. Very interesting. Justice Alito.
Oh, the worst word salad that came out of the highlights came from Justice Jackson, and she literally could not get out of her own fumbling way. Like it was a terrible set of questions. It makes you wonder if she's qualified to be on the bench, but the way it works is the way it works. She's there. But I hope that doesn't represent even the common sense aspect for the other liberal justices.
Right. She makes no sense with the questions that she asks. And she talks all the time. She asks more questions than any other justice on the bench. And she, digs herself a hole
Which is funny because she's kind of bookended by Clarence Thomas, who asks almost no questions.
Correct.
Many times.
Correct. Correct.
So who do you feel like asked the questions that really cut to the heart of the matter the best? I did see Alito's kind of big highlight, but were there others that were, seemingly truly engaged on that?
Well, I think that the most important question that was asked that gets to the crux of the issue, because language matters, and I think that we've
what the whole thing's about.
Right, we've given the left. Even Justice Barrett was using the left's language. She was using the words cisgender and trans girl and trans boy, and we're thinking, what are you doing? Like, stop giving into the left and using their language. But anyway, Justice Alito really hit to the heart of the matter. He basically said, he asked the ACLU attorney, what does it mean? What does it mean to be a boy, a girl, or a man, or a woman? And the ACLU attorney said, we don't have a definition for the court.
From New York, that Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back, Kevin McCullough. Glad to have you with us. It's That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com for everything related. We've got the podcast, the TV show, the columns, everything you want, all in one place, never behind a paywall. We just want you to have access to it, and we're grateful to be able to do that. There's probably been no single issue that I was more fervent on over the last 3 to 4 years, particularly into the election cycle, than insisting upon getting back to the traditional definition of what makes a man and a woman, a boy and a girl, different from each other, fully equal under law. Look, I believe that equality is something that is God-given. I think it is. We derive that right from God, not from any piece of paper that says it's there. But that doesn't mean that distinctions are eliminated, which is what this whole movement has been trying to do. We want to say that boys and girls are completely interchangeable. And even after years and years of giving hormones to one or the other, we've not been able to change actual DNA. So that argument's pretty much run its course. That is not stopping the left, however, from trying to insist upon putting them in the same locker rooms, treating them as though they are interchangeable. And this is kind of the basis of what became a huge movement for women in the 2024 election cycle to take back their safe spaces, places where they are. And Beth Parlato is back with us from the Independent Women's Forum. And Beth, I give that context for a reason. People throw around, you said we've lost some of the battle on language. We totally have. We talk about safety and fairness and equality and all these things, and we've made them into meanings that they were never intended to mean. And the left has done a very good job of co-opting that language and saying we're going to make a different priority out of this issue than what it should be, which is the safety and the elevation of women's opportunities and the ability to compete, the ability to have scholarships or state records or just safety in the locker room. And all of that's been wiped away, oddly enough, in the aftermath of Title IX to make way for this crazy, let's call everybody the same and stick them all in the same locker room kind of mentality. And I know that people will call me a bigot for saying all of this, but this is what's true. I'm the father of a daughter. I'm very protective of what I allow her to engage in. And so I think the one demographic they didn't dare poll in terms of their feelings on this across the country are daughters' fathers. Like if you go ask dads of daughters what they think about these issues, you're not going to get any ambiguity. There's not going to be any of this, oh, well, we need to, all search our feelings and have, kindness for, no. You get people that are a danger to my daughter away from them when they are in vulnerable spots. And so the issue becomes, does this determination by the court just impact Idaho, just impact West Virginia? Or do you think that there's a possibility that it may sprout, roots and move into other states and affect other states' laws?
Well, that was the initial hope. All of us, going into these arguments in January, we were all hoping that we would be ultimately in June getting a very broad ruling that the court would actually define sex on their own. Like the court would say, as the supreme law of the land, this is what sex means, and they would define male and female. And not only would that apply to athletics, it would go, as you suggested, to all other women's private spaces. Now we're talking locker rooms, shower rooms, restrooms, domestic violence shelters, prisons, and that's really what we needed. And that's what, when you started out this segment saying you've heard different things and everybody's unsure, that's where we are unsure. We don't feel as confident. We believe they're going to uphold the laws in these states, which would be good news for the 27 states. We're not quite sure if the court is going to give us this broad ruling that we wanted, where they will actually define sex. And the reason why we're saying that we're unsure, is because the questioning was focused so much on the historical definition of sex. that the court may not now, they can fall back on, this is what sex meant in 1972 when Title IX it became law. They may not give us their definition of sex. And that's what we need. We need their definition of sex as the highest, supreme law of this land. Since Congress hasn't done it, Congress hasn't codified it in law. We needed the Supreme Court to say this. So now we can say sex means biological sex. It does not include gender identity. Men, stay out of our private spaces, stay out of our athletics. You can never, no matter how many hormones you take, you can never become a woman. So stay out of our spaces. And that's what we wanted to happen. We're not quite confident that that's what we're going to get. Thing. Okay. Because what happens with, as you know, a new administration can come in and then President Trump's executive order protecting women's sports and women's spaces is gone. So we really need it codified in law. So Congress really needs to do their job.
All right. Good place to wrap it up. Beth Parlato, thank you for your fight, for what you're doing for all of our daughters, mine included, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. Have a great day.
Kevin McCullough coming right back. Don't go away.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's Kevin McCullough, That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com for everything related to it. As we are continuing to keep our eye on all things domestic, of course, lots of news being made in the homeland this week. But I want to turn to foreign policy for a minute or two, because this administration has the ability to spin plates in multiple areas at the same time and keep them all going. Jacob Olidort rejoins us from the America First Policy Institute, one of our favorite groups of people to talk to. Jacob, I don't think I've talked to you in the new year. Happy New Year. Glad you're back.
Happy New Year.
Iran is one of those things where I don't know that the American people fully understand what we're actually up against there, and why the president is talking so tough with the mullahs. I think a lot of people think, well, we got rid of their nuclear program. Didn't that more or less cripple them? Well, when they can kill 30 to 35,000 of their own people on any given weekend, that's probably not what that means. So take us through the layers of this. Where does Iran stand right now? Do they have support from Russia and China? Are they still an armed and dangerous state? What's their threat to the region? What's their threat to the rest of the world?
Absolutely. Great to be with you again, Kevin, and Happy New Year to you and your viewers and listeners.
Thank you.
If we look at this, stepping back a bit, so there is the question of who governs Iran, and obviously the regime, the terrorist regime there at the helm. But really, this is a geopolitical issue. Iran, the Iranian regime, is the world's oldest global terror network. And obviously the lives of 241 service members in Beirut were taken in 1983 by an Iranian proxy. It was actually before 9/11. The Iranian regime was the main foreign-based source of terrorism impacting the United States and the American people. So that's kind of the context there. But today, really, the IRGC at the helm, not only, as you mentioned, the tragedy that's happening in Tehran streets, those tens of thousands that are being killed by the regime, but also impacts and destabilizes the region and the world. You have, of course, the proxy network that Israel degraded significantly over the last 2.5 years. You have Iran's tentacles in our hemisphere. Secretary of State Marco Rubio mentioned that is an objective with our actions in Venezuela right now, is to rid that country of Iran's influence. Iran is in Africa, and Iran is a huge player in Putin's war machine in Ukraine. They provide drones and ballistic missiles even to Russia. And in exchange, Russia just last year signed a 20-year pact where they would provide Russian gas to Iran, which would give Russia the revenue that they lost in that Nord Stream 1 pipeline that exploded several years ago. China is one of the top purchasers of Iranian oil, evading the global sanctions there. So Iran is really a global presence and impacts our equities and interests around the world.
Well, given that they don't have nukes anymore, given that they still are advancing their terror footprint, how likely is it that Trump is going to be able to get someone of serious nature to the table to discuss? And I got to give him credit. I mean, he's willing to try to talk first and take action as a kind of matter of last resort. But the Ayatollah certainly seems dug in and more obstinate than ever. I mean, 30 to 35,000 of his own people, butchering them. I mean, I'm getting reports from people saying that there are just stacks of bodies outside of hospitals and stuff. I mean, that's the kind of thing that takes us back to like pictures of World War II. I mean, this is really a heinous action that they're carrying out.
Absolutely. No, and the level of depravity can't be overstated. I mean, if you just look at October 7th, the events there, I mean, Hamas is a proxy of the Iranian regime. They've learned their tactics, they're implementing that, and you're obviously seeing that on a much bigger scale now in Iran. Some of those reports are really horrific and beyond our wildest imagination. And as you said, exactly, I mean, the president is right and has been gracious at every turn at preferring the diplomatic route. These are the only way to conduct a negotiation with the Iranian regime is exactly through this armada, through compelling military force and pressure against it. And there is only one way that this negotiation should go, and that is Iran giving and committing to the demands that we're making of them on the ballistic, on the nuclear, and other threats that they pose. I think the global nature, as I mentioned, of the kind of terror that this regime is responsible for, I think, is can provide the opening for really a broad kind of negotiation. Again, it will look very different given who this regime is and the ideological nature of what they do. But I think that approach of both diplomacy and military can actually have vast ramifications to advance our interests around the world, not just vis-a-vis Iran itself.
How does the rest of the West view or interact with Iran? I mean, it's one thing for Israel and the U.S. to have a very hard line, but if there are places where that pressure can be deflated, it serves no purpose for us to have, a really stern face towards them. But what does Europe, how do other free countries interact and view them at this point in time?
It's a great point. Actually, there is probably no better and no greater issue of consensus between ourselves and our allies in Europe and in Latin America, frankly, than on how to deal with the Iranian regime. You had, in 2022, actually, the EU issued sanctions against Iran because of its provision of military technology to Russia. You have Iranian dissidents living in European capitals, and they are targets of the Iranian regime activities and threats. You just had, I think in December or November, an assassination attempt at the Israeli ambassador in Mexico that was thwarted. That one, again, attempted by the Iranian regime. And so there is a great deal of consensus. A number of countries have already designated the IRGC as a terror organization. I think right now France has been calling to move in that direction, and there might even be a push to have the whole EU to do so, which would be a big coup in this context. But as I said, I think there's no greater issue of consensus between ourselves and our allies around the world on how to deal with Iran.
That is good, because we want to have plenty of company in that position. But we are uniquely targeted by them in ways that only Israel and us are kind of, it's elite air where we are in terms of how much Iran hates us.
I think the more we get the region to a place of stability, eliminate the threats, all of which have one source, and that is the Iranian regime, I think the closer we are towards a lasting peace in the region and beyond.
That would be amazing.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Michael Iglesias. Thanks for coming on my show. I sold out years ago and I'm a coward.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. You know what's so funny, Steven?
No, Gabriel. I have no idea what's funny. Tell me.
I'm fat and Mexican. Isn't that so funny? Oh my God, I'm so fat and I'm so Mexican. That's so funny, right?
Oh my God, that's hilarious. I sold out years ago and I'm a coward.
Stop the show. There he is. That's the fat Mexican who doesn't belong here. Hey, what the hell are you doing? What's going on?
I'll tell you what's going on. You're an illegal immigrant from Mexico and you're not welcome here anymore.
No, that's not true. I was born in San Diego. Come on, man. I'm fat and Mexican. Isn't that funny?
Don't waste your time, guacamole, a burrito, a salsa, whatever your name is. I don't speak Spanish. Hang on there, mister. I sold out years ago and I'm a coward. Doesn't that mean anything to you? You better back up, pal. I'm allowed to say I got scared for my life and shoot you as many times as I want.
We're gonna take Greenland, JD. We want Greenland because it's so green. And after we take Greenland, we're going after Iceland. And it's gonna be so easy. There's like 5 people in Iceland.
Donald, ICE just deported Gabriel Iglesias.
What? Seriously? That's my favorite comedian. He's so fat and Mexican. Isn't that funny? Give me the phone. I want to talk to ICE. Did you deport Gabriel Iglesias?
Yeah, I heard him say he was not only fat but also Mexican on national television. I thought he was illegal and got scared.
Damn it. Alright, you have to get him back as soon as possible, okay? And no more mistakes. You guys are really crapping the bed right now. What the hell was that?
I swear to God, she came right at me with that map.
2, 3, 8.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him from as Nostradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Still to come, Nicole Huyer, Mayor Mamdani's misery as he multiplies the sadness across the city. Gabriella Hoffman, New England Energy Mamas, and Bart Millard of Mercy Me Can Only Imagine again. Sketch comedy from Al Berry, The Babylon Bee, and Nick Peterson, and Olivia Dean returns to the spotlight. And now from Times Square, where the trash piles up, the tourists freeze like homeless, and pizza rats are better prepared than City Hall, here's the Kevin! For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough. We begin with the Department of Transportation cracking down on hundreds of English illiterate illegal immigrant truckers, pulling them off the roads as crashes mounted. Officials say reading road signs is now considered helpful, and understanding bridge out is no longer optional. Critics argue this is discriminatory, insisting trucks should simply follow their instincts and hope for the best. In entertainment, Monica Lewinsky broke down emotionally while discussing the Clinton scandal, reminding America that while politicians move on, interns get stuck in history books forever. Sources say the interview was watched by millions, most of whom suddenly remembered where they were in 1998 and felt extremely old. Kamala Harris quietly changed her campaign HQ social media handle, ditching 6'7", apparently hoping voters won't notice. Campaign aides say the new strategy is reinvention, also known as please forget everything I've ever done. Wall Street hit a milestone as the Dow passed 50,000 for the first time, sending financial experts into celebration, while average Americans checked their bank apps and found $14 and a coupon for soup. Across the pond, Prince William's zero-tolerance policy was tested after crude emails involving Sarah Ferguson surfaced, proving that royal drama remains Britain's most reliable export. Finally, Caroline Leavitt says Trump plans to skip Bad Bunny's halftime show, opting instead for just yelling at the TV like a traditional American. For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough.
Are you tired of your haggard, worn-out individualism? Are you tired of the rich getting richer while you only get moderately richer?
Billionaires are bad for society.
Are you tired of living in a country where people can work hard and save money to buy whatever property they desire?
For centuries, we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good.
We are supposed to stand with each other and help each other through everything that's happening.
I'm tired too. Join me as we replace that cold, insensitive individualism with the glowing warmth of collectivism. With collectivism, everyone will have the same amount of money. No more worrying about where you will live. The government will take care of all your housing needs. No more having to manage the clutter of your many things strewn about the house because you won't have any things. No more driving those evil climate change causing cars. The city will pay for you to ride the bus or subway where you can connect with the community around you. And there's so much more. The warmth of collectivism will help you lose weight, try delicious new cuisine, and appreciate your loved ones since they could die at any moment. It's a real great leap forward. In short, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Or else. The warmth of collectivism. Coming soon to a Democrat-run city near you.
Right here. Or perhaps leering science over here. Or leering the future language of Minnesota. Well, imagine no more. Welcome to the Quality Leering Center. At the Quality Leering Center, we strive for greatness, not only for your child, but more importantly, for our luxurious lifestyles, our terrorist friends overseas, and Democrat politicians right here in the U.S. To achieve that greatness, we follow the 5 fundamental tenets to success: fabricate everything, receive government funds, act the victim, undermine the opposition, and deny, distract, demonize. All of our dedicated teachers are former Somalian pirates, so you can be sure your child is in good hands with someone whose IQ is equivalent to a school zone speed limit. Speaking of pirates, Democrats, members of Congress, and even Governor Walz fully support our business operations. Rest assured, absolutely no one will be held accountable. They don't just turn a blind eye for the sake of money, they crank their head 180 degrees. At the Quality Leering Center, we recognize there have been an abundance of fraud scandals, coincidentally, right here in Minnesota, also involving billions in government funding, and also run by Somalians. Therefore, to solidify your trust, we promise to lear from their mistakes and ensure your tax dollars reach the right hands in Somalia. Your toothpaste may not make it through TSA, but $700 million in cash, we can make that happen. Now you might be wondering, I thought this was a daycare. What about the kids? That's all just politics. Now you're getting it. We know that you have plenty of options here in Minneapolis, but while other daycares receiving government funding are only open for 15 minutes a day, we're open for over 45 minutes Tuesday through Wednesday. And if that's not enough, here's some 5-star reviews from happy customers. Thanks, John Smith. Hey, if you're in the neighborhood, don't bother stopping by. And if you have any questions, please ask yourself this first. What happened to those who questioned Tim Walz's agenda in the past? For more information, please visit yourqualitylearingcenter.com. The Quality Learing Center. Leering made fun.
Imagined by Mercy Me, one of the most beloved songs of all time.
You inspired millions of people. I mean, what did you think was going to happen? You're just going to ride off into the sunset? No more struggles or pain? So how about you tell me what's really going on? All these years later, seems we find ourselves at the crossroads.
They say sometimes you win some.
The question is,
sometimes you lose some.
Are we still headlining material?
You got another hit cooking?
I know you're able and I know you care.
This tour is your dream. It's our dream.
I'm Tim. I'm Bart's warm-up. This is my first tour, you know? It's my first tour, too.
When did accountant Bart show up?
I don't know, man. About the time I invited my diabetic kid along on this writer's block-inducing make-or-break tour. Worried I might break him.
Or he just might fix you.
I
just want to write something that helps people. Through the pain we all go through, you will never understand what I'm going through. Gratitude, grief, finding a way to hold them both. God is in fire, and it is beautiful. This song needs you. Sometimes your dreams can rise from the ash.
Ready or not, we'll be right back. That's Kevin. From New York, that Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back from Times Square. It's That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com. Kevin McCullough, glad to be with you. Everything that you want is at that website, including podcasts and videos and all the stuff that we do week to week. We never put it behind a paywall because we want you to have access to it 24/7 without cost. Nicole Huyer is with us from the Heritage Foundation. And Nicole, you've been in recent weeks watching the brand new mayoralty of one Mr. Zohran Mamdani. He's been at the job now for a month. What has he done to date?
Absolutely. Great question. And it is certainly tragic that he has another 3 years and 11 months ahead of him. But to date, some of the things that he has been able to allegedly accomplish so far, he passed, I think, a couple weeks ago, something called 2Care with the assistance of Kathy Hochul, which was a universal child care for all 2-year-olds. So that was actually one campaign promise he was able to keep. He campaigned on universal child care for all children ages 6 to 5 years old. So he's already got the 2-year-olds down, which of course is going to be a huge taxpayer burden. Some recent safety proposals I saw pledging $1.1 billion to the Department of Community Safety, which are basically glorified mental health workers that he hopes will eventually replace police in the city, which would make the city a lot more dangerous than it is now. But we are only a month in. He campaigned on a law of socialist promises like the government grocery stores, rent freezes that he has been very heavily pushing, a $30 minimum wage he's been heavily pushing, and just all of these things, of course, financed by taxpayers.
I don't think a lot of people watching, especially if they live outside of New York, really have an appreciation for this. But there have been changes even in things like the COPA law, where if you own a property, you can't even just sell it outright without first having to offer it up to a nonprofit that the city will then require you to accept the offer from. Like this is like crazy, like Soviet era style stuff.
It really is. And especially looking at housing, just the price controls that he wants to implement, the rent freezes, essentially a price ceiling with saying how much landlords can charge. And we know, just not in economic theory, but from experience and from history, we see the detriments of what happens when you impose housing controls. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about you, because you've written in more in depth about some of these particular policies. The government-owned grocery stores. What do we know about not only what he wants to do, but has it ever been tried before? What's the result going to be like? Is there anything we can, base a prediction on?
No, great question, Kevin. He wants to implement 5 government grocery stores located, one in each of New York City's 5 boroughs. They will be located on public property, so they won't have to pay or property taxes, already putting them at a sort of competitive advantage in the market. They will be run at a 0% profit margin, meaning they will be 100% financed by taxpayers. And we know from just looking at economic theory, what happens when you have government involvement in the free market. It's always inefficient and it's costly. The private sector simply does it better. And we have seen this play out, not just domestically. We've seen some government grocery stores in America. One of them was in Erie, Kansas in 2021, and it actually closed after, I think, less than 4 years of operating at a net loss. It was too costly to taxpayers, and they eventually leased it to the private sector, which was sort of comical in the sense that the government intervened in the market and then ended up having to lease operations to the private sector, who simply does it better. We've also seen in Baldwin, Florida, another example. They opened a store in 2019, once again, consistently operating at a loss. It was too costly to taxpayers. And those are just two examples from within the United States. But of course, the big example that economists and free market proponents always point to is the Soviet Union. And it's absolutely true. Looking at the disparity in what happens when you nationalize food supply versus a free market system like we have in the U.S. In the Soviet Union, when the government took over the food industry, essentially, it resulted in shortages, in the empty shelves, the rationing, and the Soviet bread lines. So this idea of government grocery stores is not new. We know that it fails in economic theory. We've seen it fail in history, and it is pretty devastating to see Zohran Mamdani campaign on this, and he actually wants to implement it in New York City.
When he says that he wants the stores to operate at a break-even level, how does that work? Because you have to have supply, you have to have labor that mans the store, and then you have to have a way of making sure that the operations go on day to day, things like electricity and broadband and other stuff. Physically, this wouldn't be like people just come in off the street and just get groceries for free. They're going to have to pay something for these things, right?
Yes, the prices will be kept artificially low compared to maybe private stores, but they will be run at no profit, meaning they will be 100% financed by taxpayers. And we know when the government isn't using its own money, it typically doesn't use that money well.
Not efficiently,
meaning that this is going to be extremely burdensome to taxpayers. And it is quite interesting that he says it will be run for no profit because, like you mentioned, they have to pay labor, they have to pay to keep the lights on, they have to pay to actually get the supply of goods that will be in the store. But comparing that to the private sector, private stores only make a profit margin of about 2%. So they're not these greedy stores that the media are often socialist.
No, I'm very well aware. John Katzimatidis is a friend, and he's been operating Gristides and D'Agostino's here in the city for years. And most years he loses money on his grocery operation. Very few years does he make anything more than 2 or 3%. And a lot of times he just eats cost on things. And he does not have a particularly discount-oriented store. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that is going to be ideal, especially considering his operation is not by any means a luxury or something fanciful that's running up a big profit margin. He's barely making it, and he has higher prices than some of the suburban areas where you can go and get the same groceries at a lower cost. You have to travel to get them, but the advantage is the closeness. I can't see how Mamdani does anything close to this and brings about not only a good experience for the consumers, but there's no way that those stores stay in business.
That's absolutely right. And looking at the examples that I talked about earlier in Florida, in Kansas, that have opened or in the past opened the stores, they were too costly to taxpayers. The government figured out that they just can't compete with the private sector. The private sector does it better because they're better equipped to handle the intricacies of running a business.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com. Well, it may be kind of ironic that here in the middle of the coldest of the cold part of the year, we're going to talk about energy and things that make us get warmer. That's because literally on my yard right now, I've got like 28 inches of snow that has been sitting there for more than a week. The whole neighborhood looks like pieces of wedding cake parked on each other's yards. But here to discuss the energy issue with us is Gabriella Hoffman from the Independent Women's Forum. We always love talking to Gabby because she's always got interesting facts. And Gabby, I have to, you've recently wrapped up a poll that looks at women's views in New England specifically. I'm going to ask you why that in a second, but I couldn't help but just think about how ironic this is because the mayor of Boston, who I'm really not sure has an IQ above maybe a crayon, said this week that she thinks that that anybody in the world has the right to come to the U.S. to seek asylum, and she wouldn't put limitations on it. So I'm assuming like the Boston bomber and the 9/11 hijackers and all these other things. I don't think she represents the way most New England women think, but it certainly stands out when she makes such an outlandish statement. And you've been talking to New England women about energy in particular. What have you discovered?
Women definitely feel like they're not getting the truth about energy costs and the root causes. So a lot of people like to understand that, or they understand rather that gasoline and electricity, they're derivatives of energy. They're not one and the same thing, of course. And how gasoline and fuel prices are structured is very different from how electricity is regulated. And so the first thing that came to us when we were conducting this was, how do we make that distinction, and how do we create questions that are, of course, impartial and fair, and kind of get the women to, expand and maybe, change their perspective or learn more about energy issues that they weren't already versed on.
Okay.
So we saw that there's a huge deficit in understanding derivatives of energy, particularly electricity versus fuel costs. So I think people conflate, especially women, not because there's anything wrong with it, but it's just purposely convoluted to understand the difference between how or what structures go behind, gas prices versus electricity prices. So gas prices are more factored by global conditions, markets, etc. Electricity is more so regulated by the states.
I want to pick up on something you just said, though, that they are presented information that's purposefully convoluted. I think that it hasn't been just targeting women in terms of how this issue has been discussed. I think the goal, particularly of the greenies, has been to confuse everybody as much and
Correct.
as often as they possibly can. And that has a sincere output and impact on what you were measuring here, the derivatives versus the types and so forth. And I'm dying to know, like, when they begin to get clarity on it, how does that change their perspective?
They revealed to us one of the top lines, which we can go into detail more, was an overwhelming amount, 53% overall of women across all 6 states, communicated to us that they felt misled when they learned more about the reality and inaffordability of these climate policies, because many of these climate policies, as our center has been tracking, have been adopted within the last 5 to 10 years very aggressively in the New England states. So it's not a coincidence that these higher costs are associated with the implementation of these green policies. It's not President Trump's agenda. It's not oil and gas companies that are determining prices. They have nothing to do with electricity prices. It's the utility companies, some of which are regulated or deregulated, and that doesn't mean it's market friendly. It just is how electricity markets are operated in the United States. They're responding to pressures, and they're often implementing cost of compliance from green mandates that are handed down in state legislatures. So that is why, especially New England, which tends to be a more progressive set. So obviously there are a couple states in New England.
These were going to be the areas that adopted the green stuff first, because that's their voter base.
Yes. Yes. So why New England? To your earlier point, New England, there are a couple states which are somewhat competitive. Maine and New Hampshire are ones that we're looking at on our C4 side. And we thought, okay, so if we examine the whole region, part of, and this was done on our C3, this is not a C4 poll. So it's not political in the sense of like examining partisan thinking. But our C3 conducted this because we were very curious. We knew this area was historically progressive for the last century. What are women thinking there? And also women, the reason why we don't see them necessarily embracing energy abundance as openly as men is because women tend to support environmentalist efforts over energy development. Or if they support energy development, they like renewables, solar and wind in particular. But what our poll found was actually once they're presented more information, the true costs of these green policies, when they learn about how natural gas and nuclear tend to occupy more of the grid than solar and wind, they start to have questions, and then they start to challenge. We think that they're starting to challenge that, putting the environment above economic prosperity.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. Kevin McCullough, glad to have you with us. That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com for all things related to the show, including the podcast, if you want to go back and re-listen to some of the conversations. Very excited to have my next guest back. He has a new movie coming out, and it was when his previous movie was coming out that he was last with us in studio here in New York. But this time joining us via the virtual magic of television, Bart Millard of Mercy Me and the author of I Can Only Imagine, the song and the book and the movie, and now Even If, Trusting God Through the Fire, a follow-up companion to the story that we thought we knew a lot of how it turned out. Bart, welcome back. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's I think a lot of people thought after the end of the first movie that was probably going to be it in terms of the story. And yet you guys have so much material. You've got another whole sequence of things to tell us about. And I think it's embodied a lot in the book, Even If, as well. What happened?
Oh, well, I thought that was it too after the first one. And it wasn't one of our producers named Cindy Bond. She was the reason the first one got off the ground. It took her about 8 years from when she was looking for a song that had a popular song that had a story that was worth making a movie about. She approached me and heard the story, said, I want to make a movie. I thought she was crazy. 8 years later, that's how long it took. The movie gets released. And the second it came out, she went through some personal stuff, and Even If really ministered to her. And so she was at it again saying, I want to make a movie around the song Even If. And I was like, first off, we've had plenty of Mercy Me, and then I don't know what the story would be. She goes, well, we'll find the story. Maybe it's a letter, fan mail you've gotten. Like, we can find something. Just meet with the writer. And after years of saying no, I finally met with Brent McCorkle, who co-wrote Imagine and wrote and directed Jesus Revolution. And we reluctantly got together just so we could tell Cindy we tried. And somewhere in that conversation, he was like, where did the song actually come from? And I told him the story about my son being diagnosed with diabetes when he was 2 and this years of depression, and he was in tears, and he goes, I don't know if you're going to be thrilled to hear this, but I think that's the movie. He goes, and I think he was like, what if we actually literally got the band back together, like use the same characters and treat it like this spiritual sequel, if you will. And it was a little too much to comprehend. I was reluctant, like, I don't know, is there really a story there? And the second that I saw the script and the way Brent wrote it, I felt like I was outside of myself, blown away. I was like, man, this is way less boring than my actual life is what it felt like. And they just did a beautiful job of telling a story. And I was able to see things that I just overlooked living life, and just how probably how grateful my relationship with my son is now, especially after seeing the things. Part of the movie is about my struggle with my son, and from my perspective, when they make a movie, they interview you for hours and hours. They interviewed me and my wife, and Tim Timmons and his wife, and my son. I saw my son's interviews later, like while making the movie. And that's the first time I realized how much he struggled from his perspective. And so it was very therapeutic, very eye-opening of, him saying, man, I saw my dad play around with my brothers and sisters, but then it would be like, don't eat this, take your shot. And he was just a doctor to me. And I never realized it. I knew I felt it, but never knew how much he felt it growing up. And so there was some healing that took place while making the movie. I mean, we were already at a great place, but I was like, buddy, I had no idea. And so it was fun to walk alongside and kind of see this story progress with my son and the rest of my family.
The idea of families going through difficulty is not one that's particularly unique to you and your circumstance. And yet it's also cautious for us not to think that because one story deals with cancer and another with, some other problem or some tragedy here or car wreck there, we can tend to sometimes do kind of whataboutism and kind of like, well, I don't know if they've experienced what I've experienced. Your message is kind of like wherever you're at on that spectrum, that even if it's the worst, even if it's somewhere on the path, God's there for you.
100%. Like the thing I've heard most in some of the early screenings we've done is, a child with type 1 diabetes, like there's something about these chronic illnesses that the fact they never go away and they eat at you nonstop, it never lets up. But at the same time, there's this voice in your head saying, don't complain too much. It could be worse. And, at least he's with you. At least he's somewhat healthy. And so I think a lot of people are dealing with chronic illnesses, whether it's diabetes or rheumatoid, just things that don't go away, but at least they're still here. They feel like they don't have a voice. They don't have a moment to where they can just scream and say, this stinks. It's hard. And so we've had so much feedback of people in those situations saying, man, for about 2 hours, I felt seen, I felt heard, and just tears in their eyes. One of my favorites of all time was at a screening. This mom came up and she was like grandmother type age, and she had her adult daughter with her who has Down syndrome, and the daughter's just like arms wrapped around her waist and hugging her mom. And she goes, first, I want to say I wouldn't change a thing. I adore this child more than life itself. And she goes, but it's so hard. And I had to mourn that she wouldn't marry like every mom dreams their daughter, or these things that you have planned when you give birth to a child. And she goes, mind you, I wouldn't change a thing, but there are times that I just want to shake my fist at God, but I feel guilt for doing that, for even saying it's hard. And she goes, and for the duration of this movie, she was probably one of the first ones that said, I just felt heard, that it's okay to say it's hard, God, and that, it was just a beautiful, beautiful moment. And so I kind of underestimated that message until we started doing screenings. And that's been the predominant thing that people have said to me, that are like, I haven't told many people that my son is a diabetic, but it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I didn't think anybody could relate. And isolation is the worst thing you can do when you're struggling. And so the fact, if you can see this movie and walk out going, hey, I'm not alone in this, then that makes it all worth it.
And if you can take some community with you to see the movie, that's even better, especially if you're the one that's walking through something. And it's interesting because one of my pastors said many, many years ago, Dr. Ray Pritchard, a fabulous teacher and multiple successful author, but he says, you're in one of three places in life. You're in a crisis, you've just come out of a crisis, or you're about to head into one. And that's kind of like, I guess for the believer in particular, we should know that in advance and be kind of ready to live in that culture, kind of anticipating it, because the people that are around us will look to us to see if that faith that we talk about is consistent.
That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show.